A German shepherd had his mouth sealed shut with hot glue, unable to call for help. But a baby's reaction as he approached shocked everyone around. Subscribe now and see how that gesture revealed an unbelievable scene. The forgotten bend of Millers Creek Road hadn't seen many visitors in years. Tall grass swayed in the dry summer breeze, broken fence posts tilted at odd angles, and the rusted barbed wire drooped like an afterthought. This remote corner of Lincoln County, Kentucky, seemed suspended in a different time, a place where secrets could be buried and forgotten. Jack Harmon wiped sweat from his brow as he walked along the dusty road. At 42, he had the weathered face of someone who'd spent too much time under the open sky. A former park ranger turned night watchman at the county's reservoir, Jack often took these long afternoon walks before his evening shift. It helped clear his mind, especially after the divorce and custody battle that had left him seeing his daughters only on alternating weekends. The temperature had climbed past 90 degrees, and the humidity wrapped around him like a wet blanket. He was just about to turn back when something caught his eye, a dark shape near the ditch, partially hidden by overgrown grass. At first, Jack thought it might be a deer that had been hit by a car, but as he approached, the shape revealed itself to be a German shepherd, laying motionless on its side. The dog's chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, its eyes glazed and fixed on some distant point. "Hey there, buddy," Jack called softly, kneeling a few feet away. The dog didn't move, no tail wag, no ear twitch, not even a warning growl. Something was wrong. Jack reached for his water bottle, unscrewing the cap. "You must be thirsty in this heat." He moved closer, extending his hand with the water. The dog's eyes flickered toward him, conscious, alert, but unable to respond. And that's when Jack saw it. The animal's entire muzzle had been sealed shut with hardened glue. Strips of industrial-strength adhesive covered the dog's mouth, preventing it from drinking, eating, or even panting properly in the sweltering heat. "Jesus Christ," Jack whispered, horror washing over him. He pulled out his phone and called the only veterinarian in Oak Ridge, the small town where he lived. Dr. Emma Winters answered on the third ring. "Emma, it's Jack. I found a dog out on Millers Creek Road. Someone's glued its mouth shut. It's in bad shape." 20 minutes later, Jack's pickup truck bounced down the gravel driveway of Oak Ridge Animal Clinic. Emma was waiting outside with a stretcher and her assistant Tyler. Together, they carefully transferred the German shepherd from Jack's truck. "I've never seen anything like this," Emma said, her face grim as she examined the dog under the harsh fluorescent lights of the examination room. "This wasn't an accident. Someone deliberately did this." The dog lay still on the metal table, its eyes now closed from exhaustion. An IV drip delivered fluids to its dehydrated body. "Can you help him?" Jack asked. "We'll try. I need to sedate him and carefully remove this adhesive. Then we'll see what damage has been done underneath." She glanced at her assistant. "Call Sheriff Davis. This is animal cruelty." By nightfall, news of the German shepherd had spread through Oak Ridge like wildfire. In a town of just over 3,000 people, where everyone knew everyone else's business, such cruelty was unthinkable. The local Facebook group buzzed with outrage, prayers, and theories about who could have done such a thing. Grace Aldridge, who ran the town's only diner, set up a donation jar by the register. The Methodist Church announced a special prayer meeting. Even Mayor Thompson, not known for his love of animals, stopped by the clinic to see if there was anything the town could do. On the outskirts of town, in a small white farmhouse surrounded by maple trees, Sarah Bennett scrolled through her phone, reading about the dog on the community page. At 31, she was still considered a newcomer in Oak Ridge, having moved there just 14 months ago with her infant son, Noah. "How could anyone do something so awful?" she whispered to herself, glancing at Noah, who slept peacefully in his playpen nearby. At 15 months old, he was the center of her universe, the reason she'd fled Boston and her failed marriage. seeking a quieter life where no one knew her name or her past. Sarah continued reading the updates. Dr. Winters had managed to remove most of the adhesive, but the dog was severely traumatized. The clinic didn't have space to keep him long-term, and there was no proper animal shelter in Oakridge. Someone would need to foster him until a permanent solution could be found. Without fully understanding why, Sarah felt drawn to this story. Perhaps it was the cruelty, so at odds with the idyllic, small-town image Oakridge projected. Or perhaps it was something deeper, a recognition of another soul adrift and wounded. She looked again at Noah, his chubby cheeks flushed with sleep, his tiny fist curled against his favorite blanket. Her son knew nothing of cruelty or abandonment. She had made sure of that, even if it meant starting over with nothing but 2 suitcases and whatever cash she could withdraw before leaving her old life behind. Sarah took a deep breath and made a decision that would alter the course of not just her life, but the lives of everyone connected to that broken dog. She picked up her phone and dialed the number listed for the animal clinic. Dr. Winters, this is Sarah Bennett. I'm calling about the German Shepherd. Across town, in a small apartment above the hardware store, Sheriff Tom Davis sat at his kitchen table reviewing photos Jack had taken at the scene. 23 years in law enforcement, and he'd never seen an animal treated this way in Oakridge. The dog's tag had been removed, and there was no collar. But Dr. Winters had found something else, a microchip. We should have the registration information tomorrow, Emma had told him. Then maybe we'll know who this dog belongs to. Tom sipped his coffee, staring at the photos. Something about this case unsettled him deeply. Oakridge had its share of troubles, domestic disputes, occasional drug problems, teenagers causing mischief, but calculated cruelty was rare. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. Robert, it's Tom Davis. I need to ask you about something. Miles away, in a private care facility in Lexington, an elderly woman named Eleanor Walsh sat by her window, staring out at the gathering darkness. At 74, her mind occasionally wandered, but tonight she was unusually agitated. He's out there somewhere, she kept telling the night nurse. Duke is out there, and he needs me. I'm sure your son will visit soon, Mrs. Walsh, the nurse replied, misunderstanding. Eleanor shook her head, tears forming in her rheumy eyes. Not my son, my Duke. Someone's hurt him. I can feel it. The nurse patted her hand sympathetically, making a note to ask Dr. Parker about adjusting Eleanor's medication. Meanwhile, Eleanor continued to stare out the window, her weathered hands clutching a faded photograph of a German Shepherd puppy taken many years ago. In the animal clinic, the sedated dog dreamed fitfully, its legs twitching as though running. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, no one noticed the small white patch of fur on its chest, shaped almost perfectly like a star, a distinctive mark that would soon connect dots no one yet knew existed. And in her farmhouse, Sarah Bennett finally fell asleep, unaware that her impulsive decision to help an injured animal would soon unravel secrets she never knew were woven into the fabric of her own life. Secrets that would reshape everything she thought she knew about herself, her son, and the life she'd fled. The following morning dawned clear and bright over Oakridge. Sarah Bennett stood in Dr. Winters' small veterinary clinic, her son Noah balanced on her hip. The toddler was unusually quiet, his blue eyes wide as he took in the unfamiliar surroundings. The antiseptic smell, the humming fluorescent lights, and the occasional bark from the kennels in the back. I appreciate you considering fostering him, Dr. Winters said, leading them toward a quiet room away from the main examination area. But I should warn you, he's still very traumatized. We've managed to remove all the adhesive, but the psychological damage. She trailed off, shaking her head. Has anyone claimed him? Sarah asked. Not yet. The microchip is registered to someone in Lexington, but we're still waiting for the company to provide contact details. Sheriff Davis is following up this morning. They stopped outside a door marked isolation. Through the small window, Sarah could see the German Shepherd lying on a padded mat. His muzzle was clean now, but noticeably raw and irritated. An IV line was still attached to his front leg, and his eyes, amber and intelligent, stared vacantly at the wall. "He hasn't eaten anything yet," Emma explained softly. "Won't even try. He's accepting fluids, which is something, but he doesn't trust anyone to come near his mouth." Understandably. Sarah felt Noah squirm in her arms, his attention now fully focused on the dog beyond the glass. He leaned forward, little hands pressing against the window. "Da!" he exclaimed, his word for anything furry, whether cat, dog, or the neighbor's rabbit. "That's right, baby. That's a doggy," Sarah whispered, though her throat felt tight with emotion. "A hurt doggy." Emma watched them for a moment. "Have you had dogs before?" "Growing up, yes. A golden retriever named Sandy, but not since college." Sarah hesitated. "Do you think this is a bad idea? I mean, with Noah?" "Honestly, I'm not sure what's best for this dog right now. He needs specialized care, but the nearest animal rehabilitation center is in Louisville, and they're at capacity." Emma sighed. "Let's just see how he responds to you. No pressure, either way." They entered the room slowly. The German Shepherd's ears twitched at their arrival, but otherwise he remained motionless. His body was thin but muscular, his coat dull from stress and dehydration. Dr. Winters estimated he was around 6 years old, middle-aged for his breed. "Hey there, boy," Sarah said softly, keeping her distance. She set Noah down on a chair, near the door, well away from the dog. "We just came to visit." The dog's eyes flicked toward her voice, then away again. There was no tail wag, no sign of interest or fear, just emptiness. Dr. Winters knelt a few feet from the dog, speaking in a gentle voice. "We've been calling him John Doe, but that's a bit impersonal. Do you have any name ideas, Sarah?" Before Sarah could answer, a small thump made them both turn. Noah had somehow wiggled off the chair and was now sitting on the floor. Before either woman could react, he started crawling directly toward the German Shepherd. "Noah, no!" Sarah lunged. "You forward," but Emma caught her arm. "Wait," the veterinarian whispered urgently. "Look at the dog." The German Shepherd's posture had changed subtly. His head was slightly raised, ears forward, eyes locked on the approaching toddler. But there was no aggression in his stance, just an intense, focused attention, unlike anything he'd shown since arriving at the clinic. Noah crawled without hesitation, making his way across the clinical tile floor with determined little movements. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest, every maternal instinct screaming to snatch her baby away from potential danger. But something in the dog's expression held her back, a sudden spark of life where before there had been only emptiness. When Noah reached the dog's mat, he paused. The German Shepherd and the toddler regarded each other with a gravity that seemed absurd between a battle-scarred animal and a baby still in diapers. Then, with the simple confidence of a child who knows no fear, Noah reached out and gently placed his small hand on the dog's injured muzzle. Sarah gasped, but Dr. Winters kept a steady grip on her arm. "Just watch," she whispered. The dog didn't flinch. Instead, he blinked slowly, something shifting in those amber eyes. Noah babbled, softly incomprehensible toddler speak that nevertheless carried a tone of unmistakable empathy. He patted the dog's muzzle with feather-light touches, his small face serious and intent. Then, in a gesture that brought tears to both women's eyes, Noah leaned forward and pressed his lips gently against the dog's injured snout. A gesture of pure instinctive compassion that transcended species, age, and pain. The room fell completely silent. The dog's eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, something had changed. A nearly imperceptible shift in muscle tension, a subtle release, as if the animal had finally exhaled after holding its breath for days. "I've never seen anything like this," Emma whispered, her professional composure temporarily abandoned. It's like they know each other. Sarah could only nod, her throat too tight for words. Something about this scene felt strangely familiar, as if she were remembering it rather than witnessing it for the first time. Noah continued his gentle ministrations, now softly patting the dog's forehead and ears. To everyone's astonishment, the German Shepherd slowly, hesitantly raised his head and licked the baby's hand, once, twice, with infinite gentleness. "I think," Sarah finally managed, her voice thick with emotion, "I think we'll call him Ranger." The name had come from nowhere, and yet it felt right, felt known somehow. Emma looked at her curiously but didn't comment. Over the next 3 days, the transformation in Ranger was remarkable. With Noah's daily visits, the dog began to show signs of recovery that went beyond physical healing. He started accepting small amounts of soft food, allowed Dr. Winters to change his bandages without sedation, and even managed a tentative tail wag when Sarah entered the room. But it was Noah who elicited the most dramatic responses. The moment the toddler appeared, Ranger's entire demeanor would change. His body would relax, his eyes would brighten, and he would watch Noah's every move with an attention that bordered on reverence. "It's almost like he's appointed himself Noah's guardian," Emma remarked on the 4th day as they watched Noah, sitting beside the now alert dog, babbling happily while showing him a toy car. Sarah nodded, something tugging at the edges of her memory, a half-forgotten dream perhaps, or a story heard long ago. "When can we take him home?" "His physical injuries are healing well enough. I'd say tomorrow if you're ready. Just remember, psychological trauma takes longer to heal than physical wounds." That night, after putting Noah to bed, Sarah found herself standing in the spare room that would soon become Ranger's space. She'd spent the afternoon buying supplies, a comfortable dog bed, food and water bowls, a leash and some basic toys. Everything a dog would need to start a new life. As she arranged the items, her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Sheriff got info on microchip, registered to Eleanor Walsh, resident at Lexington Pines Care Home. He's heading there tomorrow to investigate." Sarah stared at the name, a strange chill running down her spine. Eleanor Walsh. The name sounded vaguely familiar, though she couldn't place why. Perhaps she'd heard it around town. Lexington Pines was a high-end facility for seniors, mostly those with memory issues or who needed specialized care. She shook off the feeling and finished preparing the room. As she worked, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on the strange turn her life had taken. 14 months ago, she'd fled Boston with an infant and a heart full of fear, determined to outrun a past that threatened to swallow her whole. She'd chosen Oak Ridge almost at random, a dot on the map far from the East Coast, a place where her ex-husband's connections couldn't reach. The small Kentucky town had been a fresh start. She'd found work as a remote graphic designer, rented the little farmhouse, and slowly begun rebuilding a life centered entirely around Noah's well-being. She'd kept to herself, friendly but distant with neighbors, revealing little about her past. And yet here she was, about to bring home a traumatized German Shepherd that inexplicably seemed to share a bond with her son. It was the first truly impulsive thing she'd done since arriving in Oak Ridge. As she turned off the light in the soon-to-be dog room, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something larger was unfolding, that the discovery of Ranger on that forgotten road was not the beginning of the story, but rather the middle of one that had started long before. In her bedroom, she opened her nightstand drawer and removed a small wooden box, the only item she'd taken from her previous life, besides clothes and necessities. Inside was a silver locket, tarnished with age. It had been her mother's and her grandmother's before that. Sarah rarely looked at it, the memories too painful, but tonight she felt compelled to open the hinged cover. Inside was a faded photograph of a woman holding an infant. On the back, written in faint pencil, were the words, Elizabeth and Sarah, Kentucky, 1992. Sarah stared at her mother's handwriting, her fingers tracing the familiar curves. Elizabeth had never spoken much about her Kentucky roots. She'd left as a young woman, headed for Boston, and rarely mentioned her life before. Sarah had always assumed there was some painful history, a bad childhood perhaps, or a broken heart. "What secrets did you keep, Mom?" Sarah whispered to the empty room. "And why do I feel like they're suddenly catching up to me?" Across town, Sheriff Tom Davis sat in his cruiser outside the Oak Ridge Diner, reviewing his notes. The microchip company had finally provided Eleanor Walsh's information, along with a disturbing note. They'd tried contacting her multiple times in the past week to report that someone had attempted to re-register the dog under a new name, but had abandoned the process midway. Tom tapped his pen against the steering wheel, his mind working through possibilities. Tomorrow, he would drive to Lexington Pines and speak with Eleanor Walsh. He'd also put in a call to her next of kin, listed as Robert Walsh's son, with an address in Lexington. Something about this case continued to nag at him, a persistent feeling that he was missing an important connection. Tom prided himself on knowing every resident of Oak Ridge, their histories, their troubles. But Sarah Bennett remained something of a mystery since her arrival last year. Pretty, polite, but private. A single mom with no visitors, no family coming to see the baby. And now she was taking in the German Shepherd that had captured the town's attention. It was generous, certainly, but also curious. Why would a young mother with her hands already full take on a traumatized animal? Tom started his cruiser and pulled onto Main Street, heading for one last patrol before calling it a night. As he drove past the darkened storefronts and quiet houses, he couldn't shake the feeling that Oak Ridge's peaceful facade was about to be disrupted, that the discovery of a wounded dog on a forgotten road had set in motion events that would uncover long-buried secrets in this seemingly quiet town. Lexington Pines Care Home stood on 10 manicured acres at the edge of the city, its red brick facade and white columns projecting an air of genteel southern comfort. Sheriff Tom Davis parked his cruiser in the visitor's lot, straightened his uniform tie, and grabbed his notebook before heading inside. The reception area was cool and quiet, with soft classical music playing and the faint scent of lemon polish in the air. A young woman at the front desk looked up with a professional smile. "Good morning. I'm Sheriff Tom Davis from Lincoln County. I'm here to see Eleanor Walsh." The receptionist's smile faltered slightly. "Do you have an appointment, Sheriff?" "No, but it's regarding her property. Nothing to worry about," he added, seeing her expression. "Just trying to return something that belongs to her." After a brief phone consultation with someone named Dr. Myers, the receptionist directed Tom to the East Wing. A nurse met him at the security door, a trim woman in her 50s with practical shoes and a no-nonsense expression. "I'm Jane Porter, head nurse for this floor," she said, extending her hand. "Dr. Myers asked me to brief you before you speak with Mrs. Walsh. She has good days and bad days. Today seems to be somewhere in between." They walked down a carpeted hallway lined with landscape paintings and occasional sitting areas with comfortable chairs. It looked more like an upscale hotel than a medical facility. "How long has Mrs. Walsh been here?" Tom asked. "About 18 months. Her son arranged for her care after she started showing signs of cognitive decline, forgetting to turn off the stove, getting lost on familiar roads, that sort of thing." Nurse Porter lowered her voice. "Between you and me, she probably could have managed at home with daily help, but Mr. Walsh insisted on full-time care." Tom made a mental note of this. "Does she get many visitors?" "Her son comes by every few weeks, used to be more regular, but less so lately." She hesitated. "There's something you should know. Until about a week ago, Mrs. Walsh always had her dog with her during visits, a therapy animal arrangement, German Shepherd, very well behaved. but last visit her son said the dog had to be put down due to old age and illness. Tom's interest sharpened. When exactly was this? Last Thursday afternoon. Why do you ask? Thursday, the day before Jack found the dog on Millers Creek Road. Just establishing a timeline, Tom said carefully. This dog, did it have any distinctive markings? A white star-shaped patch on its chest. Mrs. Walsh called it his guardian star. She was heartbroken about losing him. They'd been together for years. The dog was originally her granddaughter's, I believe. They stopped outside a door, decorated with a small wreath of dried flowers. Nurse Porter knocked gently before opening it. Mrs. Walsh, you have a visitor. Sheriff Davis would like to ask you a few questions. The room beyond was spacious and filled with light from a large window overlooking gardens. Eleanor Walsh sat in an armchair by the window, a crocheted blanket across her knees despite the summer warmth. She was thin but elegant, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and the kind of bone structure that suggested she had once been a beauty. Sheriff? Her voice was surprisingly strong, with the faint trace of an accent Tom couldn't quite place. Have I broken the law? Tom smiled, taking the chair Nurse Porter indicated. Not at all, ma'am. I'm here about your dog. Eleanor's expression brightened, momentarily then clouded. Duke, but Robert said... She trailed off, confusion evident on her face. Mrs. Walsh, I have reason to believe your dog might be alive. A German Shepherd was found near Oak Ridge last Friday. He has a microchip registered in your name. Her hands began to tremble. Alive? But how? Robert said he was very sick, that the vet had to... She stopped abruptly, pressing her lips together. I don't understand. That's what I'm trying to figure out, Ma'am. The dog we found had been mistreated. Someone had sealed his mouth shut with industrial adhesive. Eleanor's face drained of color. No, she whispered. Who would do such a thing? That's what I'm investigating. Can you tell me about Duke? How long have you had him? She seemed to gather herself, fingers plucking at the blanket. 6 years. He was my granddaughter's dog originally. Elizabeth got him as a puppy, but when she went away to college, Duke stayed with me. After the accident, keeping him was all I could do for her. Tom's pen paused above his notebook. Accident. The car crash. 7 years ago. Eleanor's eyes grew distant. My Elizabeth. So bright, so full of life. She was only 23. I'm very sorry for your loss, Tom said gently. And your granddaughter, was she Elizabeth's daughter? Eleanor nodded, a smile briefly illuminating her face. Little Sarah, such a sweet baby. Robert was supposed to find her after Elizabeth's passing, but he said the adoptive family wanted no contact. I always wondered. Her voice trailed off, and she seemed to drift into private thoughts. Tom felt a chill run down his spine. Sarah, a baby who would now be an adult. His mind flashed to Sarah Bennett, the newcomer in Oak Ridge with her young son. Mrs. Walsh, he asked carefully, would you happen to have any photos of your family, of Elizabeth or baby Sarah? Eleanor brightened. Oh yes, in my memory box. She pointed to a carved wooden chest on her dresser. Top compartment, blue album. With Nurse Porter's nod of permission, Tom retrieved the album and brought it to Eleanor. She opened it with practiced hands, turning pages until she found what she was looking for. Here's my Elizabeth, she said proudly, pointing to a photo. Of a smiling young woman with long chestnut hair and striking green eyes. And this is baby Sarah, just before Elizabeth's, before the accident. Tom studied the photograph of a toddler with the same green eyes and a dusting of freckles across her nose. The resemblance to the young woman who now lived in Oak Ridge was unmistakable. May I take a picture of this with my phone? Tom asked. For the investigation. Eleanor nodded, then turned another page. And here's Duke as a puppy. Elizabeth gave him to me when she found out she was pregnant. Said a baby and a puppy were too much to handle at once. The photo showed a German Shepherd puppy, his ears comically oversized for his head, with a distinctive white star-shaped mark on his chest. One more question, Mrs. Walsh. You mentioned Robert was supposed to find Sarah after Elizabeth's passing. Do you know if he ever did? Eleanor's brow furrowed. He said the adoption was closed, that the family didn't want contact. But sometimes when Duke would get excited about nothing, barking at the door when no one was there, or staring at empty corners, I would joke that he sensed Sarah nearby. Her eyes cleared suddenly, fixing Tom with unexpected lucidity. Sheriff, is Duke really alive? Yes, ma'am. He's recovering at our local animal clinic in Oak Ridge. And has he found Sarah? The question was asked with such earnestness that Tom hesitated. I'm not sure yet, Mrs. Walsh, but I'm looking into it. As Tom drove back to Oak Ridge, his mind raced with possibilities. The timeline was starting to come together, but significant pieces were still missing. He needed to speak with Robert Walsh, and he needed to find out more about Sarah Bennett's background. He made a detour to the county records office, where an old friend worked in the birth certificate division. After some persuasion and the promise of dinner at the steakhouse in Danville, Tom gained access to the system. He searched for birth records for a Sarah Walsh, born in Kentucky approximately 30 years ago. There it was, Sarah Elizabeth Walsh, born May 12, 1992, to Elizabeth Ann Walsh, father unknown. No death certificate for the baby, which aligned with Eleanor's adoption story, but no formal adoption records either, which was curious. Tom's next stop was the Lexington address listed for Robert Walsh, a large house in an expensive subdivision. No one answered the door, and a neighbor informed him that Robert had left town on business 2 days ago. By late afternoon, Tom was back in Oak Ridge, parking outside the veterinary clinic. He found Dr. Winters finishing up with a patient. How's our German Shepherd doing? He asked after the client had left. Emma's face lit up. Remarkably well. Sarah took him home yesterday and I just got a text update with photos. The change in him is incredible. He's actually playing with Noah. May I see the photos? Emma showed him her phone. A series of images showing the German Shepherd lying patiently while the toddler climbed over him, another of the dog gently, taking a toy from Noah's outstretched hand, and a final one of both child and dog sleeping on a rug, Noah's small arm thrown across the dog's neck. The bond between them is extraordinary, Emma said. It's like they've known each other forever. Tom studied the photos, particularly the clear image of the white star-shaped patch on the dog's chest. Did you find any other injuries besides the adhesive? Some healed scars on his back and legs, older injuries consistent with someone beating him. And he was underweight, suggesting neglect before the incident with the glue. Emma's expression hardened. Whoever did this engaged in systematic abuse, Tom. It wasn't a one-time thing. Tom nodded grimly. I think I'm getting closer to figuring out who's responsible. I'll need to speak with Sarah. Would you mind texting her? Let her know I'll be stopping by. 20 minutes later, Tom pulled up the gravel driveway to Sarah Bennett's farmhouse. The white clapboard structure with its wraparound porch and blue shutters looked like something from a country living magazine. Peaceful, isolated, perfect for someone wanting to keep a low profile. Sarah met him at the door, Noah on her hip. The toddler was chewing on a plastic toy, his eyes bright with interest at the visitor. Sheriff Davis, she greeted him. Emma said you wanted to talk about Ranger. Ranger, Tom echoed. That's what we're calling him. He seems to respond to it. She stepped back, inviting him in. He's in the living room. He still gets nervous around men, but he's making progress. The interior of the farmhouse was simply but tastefully furnished, an eclectic mix of vintage and modern pieces that somehow worked together. The German Shepherd, Duke or Ranger, Tom wasn't sure which name was correct anymore, lay on a dog bed near the fireplace. He raised his head as Tom entered, amber eyes watchful but not fearful. He looks good, Tom commented, maintaining his distance from the dog. Dr. Winters showed me some photos. Sarah smiled, setting Noah down on the carpet. The toddler immediately crawled toward the dog, who watched him with that same intense focus Tom had seen in the photos. "They're inseparable," Sarah said. "It's the strangest thing. Noah's always liked animals, but this is different." Tom took a seat on the sofa, his notepad balanced on his knee. "Sarah, I need to ask you some questions that might seem personal, but they're relevant to my investigation." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right. Could you tell me about your background? Where you grew up, your family?" A wariness entered her expression. "I'm from Boston. I moved here last year after my divorce." "And before Boston? Were you born there?" Sarah's posture stiffened slightly. "Sheriff, what does this have to do with Ranger?" Tom decided on directness. "Today I visited the owner of this dog, his registered owner, according to the microchip. Her name is Eleanor Walsh. She lives in a care facility in Lexington, and until last week, her son was bringing the dog for regular visits." Sarah's face remained impassive, but her hands, one stroking Noah's hair as he played with the dog, trembled slightly. "Mrs. Walsh lost her daughter Elizabeth in a car accident 7 years ago," Tom continued carefully. "Elizabeth had a baby named Sarah, who was apparently adopted after her mother's passing." He paused. "Mrs. Walsh showed me photographs of her daughter and granddaughter. The resemblance is rather striking." The color drained from Sarah's face. She gathered Noah into her arms as if for protection. "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm trying to understand why this dog, who lived with Eleanor Walsh for years, has formed such an immediate and powerful bond with your son. And why, when I look at the photographs of Elizabeth Walsh, I see your eyes looking back at me." Sarah's gaze fell to Noah, who was squirming to get back to the dog. She released him reluctantly, then stood and walked to a small desk in the corner. From a drawer, she removed a worn envelope and handed it to Tom. "My adoption papers," she said quietly. "I was raised by James and Margaret Bennett in Boston. They told me I was adopted from Kentucky when I was around 2. That's all I know." Tom examined the documents. A certificate of adoption finalized in Massachusetts in 1994, when Sarah would have been approximately 2 years old. The birth mother was listed simply as E. Walsh. "Did you ever try to find your birth family?" Tom asked gently. Sarah shook her head. "My adoptive parents discouraged it. They said my mother had died, and there was no other family that wanted contact." She took a shaky breath. "After they passed away, I thought about looking, but then life got busy. College, marriage, career. By the time Noah came along, it didn't seem important anymore." Tom glanced at the toddler, who was now curled up against the German Shepherd, both apparently content in each other's company. "And what brought you to Oak Ridge, specifically?" A shadow crossed her face. "My divorce was complicated. I needed a fresh start, somewhere quiet, somewhere—" She hesitated. "Somewhere your ex-husband wouldn't think to look," Tom suggested. Sarah nodded reluctantly. "He has control issues. When I told him I wanted a divorce, things got ugly. I left in the middle of the night with Noah and just started driving south. I saw the 'Welcome to Oak Ridge' sign, and something about it felt right." Her gaze drifted to the dog and her son. "Now I wonder if it wasn't just coincidence." Tom followed her gaze, watching the remarkable bond between child and animal. "Sarah, I believe Ranger, or Duke, as Mrs. Walsh calls him, belonged to your birth mother. After she died, he lived with your grandmother, Eleanor Walsh. And somehow, against all odds, he's found his way to your son." "My grandmother," Sarah repeated softly, as if testing the word. "She's alive, and she remembers me?" "Very much so. She has photos of you as a baby." Tom hesitated. There's something else you should know. According to Mrs. Walsh, her son Robert told her that Duke had to be put down last week due to illness. Instead, it appears he abandoned the dog on Millers Creek Road with his mouth glued shut. Sarah's expression hardened. Why would anyone do that to an animal? That's what I'm still trying to determine. Robert Walsh has suddenly left town, and I'm having trouble locating him. But one thing seems clear. He didn't want his mother to have contact with this dog anymore. Tom watched her reaction carefully. And I have to wonder if it has something to do with the dog's connection to you and your son. Sarah's gaze returned to Noah, who had fallen asleep against Ranger's side, the dog's body curled protectively around the small boy. Are you saying my uncle, my birth mother's brother, might have known where I was all along? That he lied to my grandmother about not being able to find me? It's a possibility I'm considering, Tom admitted. Which raises another question. How did Ranger end up here, in Oak Ridge, so close to where you've been living? Was it truly coincidence, or did someone bring him here deliberately? Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the porch. Inside, the quiet ticking of a grandfather clock measured the silence as Sarah absorbed the implications of Tom's questions. I think, she said finally, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes, that I need to meet my grandmother, and she needs to see her dog again. Tom nodded. I was hoping you'd say that. I can arrange it for tomorrow if you'd like. As Sarah agreed, neither of them noticed Noah stirring slightly in his sleep, one small hand clutching the white star-shaped patch on Ranger's chest, a gesture so natural it seemed he'd been doing it all his life. Morning sunlight filtered through the trees as Sarah drove along the highway toward Lexington, her hands tight on the steering wheel. In the back seat, Noah babbled happily to Ranger, who sat beside his car seat with the patient dignity that seemed to characterize the German Shepherd's every movement. Sheriff Davis followed in his cruiser, a reassuring presence in her rearview mirror. Sarah's mind raced with questions. Did she have a grandmother she'd never known? Had her uncle deliberately kept them apart? And most bizarre of all, how had her mother's dog somehow found his way to her and Noah, creating this inexplicable bond? Grandma, she whispered, testing the word. It felt strange on her tongue. Sarah had called Margaret Bennett Grandma for 28 years, never knowing another woman, alive and waiting, might also lay claim to that title. The drive to Lexington Pines took just over an hour. Sarah parked in the visitor's lot, her stomach churning with nerves. Sheriff Davis pulled up beside her. You okay? He asked as she unloaded Noah and clipped Ranger's leash. Just processing, she replied, settling Noah on her hip. I still can't believe any of this is real. The receptionist, clearly briefed in advance, smiled warmly as they entered. Mrs. Walsh is in the garden pavilion. Nurse Porter will show you the way. Sarah followed the nurse through tastefully decorated hallways, Ranger walking calmly at her side, Noah watching everything with wide-eyed curiosity. She dressed carefully. That morning, a simple blue sundress that brought out her eyes, her mother's silver locket around her neck. She wanted to look her best for this moment, though she couldn't articulate why it mattered so much. The garden pavilion was a glass-enclosed structure overlooking manicured lawns and flower beds. A single figure sat in a wicker chair near the windows, her silver hair catching the sunlight. As they approached, Eleanor Walsh looked up, her expression a mixture of anticipation and disbelief. Duke? She called tentatively, her voice quavering. The German Shepherd's reaction was instantaneous. His ears perked forward, his tail began to wag, and he pulled at the leash with unexpected strength. Sarah released her grip, and Ranger bounded forward, all trauma temporarily forgotten in the joy of recognition. Eleanor's face transformed as the dog reached her, his entire body wiggling with happiness as he thrust his muzzle into her outstretched hands. Tears flowed freely down her weathered cheeks. My sweet boy, she whispered, running trembling fingers over his head, carefully avoiding his healing muzzle. I knew you couldn't be gone. I knew it. Sheriff Davis and Nurse Porter exchanged glances, both clearly moved by the reunion. Sarah stood frozen, Noah squirming in her arms as he reached toward the dog and the unfamiliar woman. Then Eleanor looked up, her gaze moving from Ranger to Sarah, and time seemed to stop. The older woman's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening in shocked recognition. Elizabeth, she breathed. Sarah found her voice. No, Mom, I'm Sarah. Elizabeth was my mother. Eleanor's expression shifted through a kaleidoscope of emotions, confusion, realization, and finally, a joy so profound it transformed her entire being. Sarah, she repeated. My Sarah, my grandbaby. She struggled to rise from her chair, and Nurse Porter rushed to assist her. Once standing, Eleanor took a hesitant step forward, her eyes never leaving Sarah's face. You have her eyes, she said wonderingly. Exactly her eyes. Sarah moved closer, uncertain what to do, how to respond to this stranger, who was also family. Noah solved the dilemma by lunging toward Eleanor with his arms outstretched, the same fearless trust he'd shown with Ranger. Without hesitation, Eleanor reached for the child. And who is this handsome young man? This is Noah, my son. Eleanor's eyes filled with fresh tears as she cradled Noah against her shoulder. A great-grandson, oh my! The toddler patted her cheek curiously, then reached down toward Ranger, who had settled at Eleanor's feet, his eyes tracking Noah's every movement. Shall we sit? Nurse Porter suggested gently, guiding Eleanor back to her chair. Sarah took the seat beside her, while Sheriff Davis positioned himself discreetly at a nearby table, giving them space while remaining close enough to observe. I don't understand, Sarah said finally. All these years, I thought there was no family looking for me. Eleanor's expression clouded. Robert told me the adoption was closed, that the family didn't want contact. Her frail hand reached for Sarah's. I never would have let you go if I'd had a choice. You were everything to me after Elizabeth. She paused, pain flashing across her face. Sheriff Davis told me about the accident, Sarah said gently. I'm so sorry. She was so young, Eleanor murmured. Just 23, and you were barely 2. Her gaze drifted to Noah, who had wiggled free and was now patting Ranger's head. About this little one's age. Sarah hesitated, then unclasped the locket from around her neck. This was in my adoption paperwork. I was told it belonged to my birth mother. Eleanor's hand trembled as she took the silver oval. I gave this to Elizabeth on her 16th birthday. It was my mother's before that. She pressed the tiny latch, and the locket opened to reveal a faded photograph. That's Elizabeth holding you, the day you came home from the hospital. Sarah stared at the image she'd looked at countless times, seeing it with new understanding. Why didn't my uncle want me to find you? Why lie about the adoption being closed? A shadow crossed Eleanor's face. Robert and Elizabeth had a complicated relationship. He was 10 years older, and after their father left, he took on responsibilities beyond his years. He resented Elizabeth's free spirit, her refusal to follow the path he thought best for her. She sighed. When she got pregnant so young, unmarried, he saw it as confirmation of everything he'd criticized about her. And after she died, I was devastated, barely functioning. Robert handled everything, the funeral, the legal matters, and arrangements for you. Eleanor's eyes grew distant. I was heavily medicated for a time. By the time I was thinking clearly again, he told me you'd been adopted by a wonderful family in New England who wanted no contact with your birth family. I begged him to at least send them photos, letters they could give you when you were older. But he said it wasn't allowed. Sarah processed this, a slow anger building within her. He lied to both of us. Eleanor nodded sadly. It appears so. But why, after all these years, would he suddenly abandon Duke, and in such a cruel manner? Sheriff Davis cleared his throat, joining the conversation. That's something I'm still trying to determine, Mrs. Walsh. It seems too coincidental that the dog would be found so close to where your granddaughter has been living this past year. Eleanor's eyes widened. You think Robert knew where Sarah was, that he deliberately left Duke near her? It's a possibility. The question is why now, after keeping you apart for so long? A look of alarm crossed Eleanor's face. The will? She whispered. Of course. What will? Sarah asked. 6 weeks ago, I updated my estate plans. After I was diagnosed with early-stage dementia last year, Robert insisted I get my affairs in order. Eleanor's gaze hardened. I left everything divided between him and you, Sarah, if you could be found. Robert was so angry. He said it was foolish to leave property to someone who might not exist anymore, who wouldn't want anything to do with us. Sheriff Davis leaned forward. Do you think Robert knew where Sarah was all along? That he kept that information from you to ensure he'd inherit everything? It seems impossible, Eleanor said. How would he have known? A memory stirred. In Sarah's mind, something from her childhood that had never made sense until now. When I was about 10, a man came to our house in Boston. I was supposed to be at school, but I'd come home early with a fever. He was arguing with my adoptive father in the study. I heard him say something about the girl and the agreement. When they realized I was home, they stopped talking immediately. Eleanor paled. You think that was Robert? That he'd been keeping tabs on you all along? It could explain why he panicked when you changed your will, Sheriff Davis suggested. If he'd been maintaining the fiction that Sarah couldn't be found, having Duke potentially lead to her would expose his lies. Sarah watched Noah playing with Ranger, the child and dog so perfectly attuned to each other, it seemed they communicated without words. But why bring the dog here? Why not just get rid of him another way? She couldn't bring herself to say the words, not with Ranger looking so content at Eleanor's feet. Sheriff Davis shook his head. That's still unclear. Maybe he couldn't bring himself to do worse, or maybe he wanted the dog to be found, but not immediately connected to your family. Eleanor reached down to stroke Ranger's head. Duke always had a special connection with you, Sarah. Even as a tiny baby, you were drawn to each other. Elizabeth used to joke that he thought he was your guardian. Her eyes crinkled with remembered fondness. When you started walking, you'd hold on to his fur for balance. He'd move so carefully, making sure you didn't fall. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. I don't remember him. I don't remember any of this. You were so young when Elizabeth died, Eleanor said softly. But Duke remembers. Dogs don't forget the people they love. As if to confirm her words, Ranger rose and padded to Sarah, resting. His head on her knee, his amber eyes gazing up at her with quiet knowledge. Noah, deprived of his playmate, toddled over with a disgruntled expression. Da! Da! He demanded, patting Ranger's side. I think he's hungry, Sarah explained, reaching for the diaper bag. It's past his snack time. Eleanor watched with grandmother's pride as Sarah efficiently produced applesauce and small crackers. You're a wonderful mother, she said. Elizabeth would be so proud. The simple words, spoken with such certainty, brought unexpected tears to Sarah's eyes. She'd never heard anyone speak of her birth mother as a real person, someone who would have had hopes and feelings about the daughter she left behind. Tell me about her, Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What was she like? For the next hour, Eleanor shared stories of Elizabeth, her passion for photography, her infectious laugh, her stubborn streak that was exactly like yours, Sarah. Each anecdote filled in pieces of a puzzle Sarah hadn't even known she was. Missing, creating a picture of the woman whose blood ran in her veins, whose eyes she saw in the mirror every day. Eventually, Noah grew fussy, signaling the end of their visit. As Sarah prepared to leave, Eleanor caught her hand. "Will you come back, both of you?" "Of course," Sarah promised without hesitation. "And Ranger too." Eleanor smiled at the name. "Ranger. It suits him somehow." Her expression grew serious. "Sarah, I understand this is all very sudden. You have your own life, your own family. I don't expect to suddenly become central to your world, but I've missed so many years with you, years Robert stole from us both. Whatever relationship you're comfortable with, I'll cherish." Sarah felt an unexpected surge of protective affection for this woman she'd just met. "We'll figure it out together," she promised, "one day at a time." As they drove back to Oak Ridge, Noah fell asleep in his car seat, exhausted from the excitement. Ranger sat alert beside him, his posture suggesting he was on guard duty. Sheriff Davis had remained in Lexington, saying he needed to follow up on some leads regarding Robert Walsh's whereabouts. Sarah's mind was overwhelmed with everything she'd learned. A grandmother, a mother whose face she now knew, a heritage beyond the loving but reserved New England household where she'd grown up. And at the center of it all, a dog who had somehow bridged the broken pieces of her family history. Back at the farmhouse, Sarah settled Noah for a proper nap in his crib. Ranger positioned himself beneath the window, apparently accepting this room as part of his territory to protect. Sarah watched them both for a moment, then went to the kitchen to make herself some much-needed coffee. As the pot brewed, she checked her phone. 3 missed calls from Sheriff Davis and a text, "Call me when you get this. Found Robert Walsh." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she returned the call. Tom answered immediately. "Sarah, Robert Walsh just arrived at his mother's care facility. He doesn't know we've connected the dots, and he has no idea you've been there today. The staff are keeping him, waiting, saying Eleanor is in therapy. What do you need me to do?" "Nothing for now. I'm heading back there to confront him with what we know. I just wanted to warn you he's surfaced." "Do you think he's dangerous?" Sarah glanced toward Noah's room, a protective instinct flaring. "I don't think so, but stay alert. Keep your doors locked and call me if anything seems off." After hanging up, Sarah double-checked all the locks and windows. She felt unsettled, knowing the uncle she'd never met, the man who had potentially orchestrated her separation from her grandmother and tried to kill her mother's dog, was just an hour away. She was pouring her coffee when Ranger suddenly lifted his head, ears perked toward the front of the house. A low growl rumbled in his throat, nothing like the playful sounds he made with Noah, but a warning vibrating with tension. Seconds later, the crunch of tires on gravel confirmed they had a visitor. Sarah moved to the window, peering through the curtain at the unfamiliar luxury sedan pulling up her driveway. A man stepped out, tall, well-dressed, with silver-streaked dark hair and a bearing that suggested authority and impatience. Even without an introduction, Sarah recognized something in his features that mirrored her own, the same high cheekbones and straight nose she saw in old photos of her mother. Robert Walsh had found her. Sarah's heart pounded as she watched him approach her front door. Ranger appeared at her side, his body rigid with alertness, another low growl emerging from deep in his chest. "It's okay," she whispered, though she didn't believe it herself. "We'll handle this." As the knock came, firm, demanding, Sarah took a deep breath and reached for her phone, sending Sheriff Davis a quick text. "He's here. At my house." Then she squared her shoulders and moved to answer the door. Ranger at her heels, both of them preparing to face the man who had altered the course of their lives through deceit and cruelty, and who might now be desperate enough to do worse. Sarah's hand hovered over the doorknob as she stared at the distorted outline of Robert Walsh through the decorative glass. Ranger stood beside her, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door just enough to see through the gap. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Robert Walsh was imposing up close, tall with broad shoulders and the confident posture of someone accustomed to authority. His eyes, a darker green than her own, widened slightly. "Sarah Bennett, I'm Robert Walsh. I believe we have some family matters to discuss." At his voice, Ranger's growl intensified. Robert's gaze dropped to the dog, and fear flashed across his face. "That's impossible," he muttered, stepping back. "That dog was left to die on Millers Creek Road, with his mouth glued shut," Sarah finished coldly. "Fortunately, someone found him in time." Before Robert could respond, Sheriff Davis's cruiser appeared on the gravel driveway. Relief flooded through Sarah as Tom approached, his hand resting near his holster. "Mr. Walsh," he called, "I was hoping to speak with you at Lexington Pines, but you left rather abruptly." They settled on the porch, Robert in a chair, Sarah and Tom on the swing, with Ranger at Sarah's feet. "How did you find me?" Sarah asked. "When I arrived at the care facility, the receptionist mentioned my mother meeting her granddaughter. It wasn't difficult to get your address." Robert straightened his tie. "Small towns have their charm, but privacy isn't one of their virtues." "Let's cut to the chase," Tom said. "We know you told your mother that Duke had to be put down. Instead, he was found abandoned with his mouth glued shut. We also have evidence you've lied to your mother about Sarah's whereabouts for decades." "That's absurd." Sarah leaned forward. "Is it when I was 10 you came to our house in Boston? You were arguing with my adoptive father about the girl and the agreement." "What agreement, Robert?" Robert's composure slipped. "You weren't supposed to be there. You were supposed to be at school." The confirmation hit Sarah like a physical blow. "So it was you. You knew where I was all along." Robert sighed heavily. "After Elizabeth's accident, our mother was in no condition to raise a child. The responsibility fell to me." "That wasn't your decision to make," Sarah said. "Wasn't it? I was executor of Elizabeth's estate, medical power of attorney for our mother. Every legal authority rested with me." His voice hardened. "Elizabeth was always irresponsible, getting pregnant at 21 with no father in the picture. When she died, you became my responsibility too." "So you gave me away," Sarah said flatly. "I found you a proper home," Robert corrected. "James and Margaret Bennett were respected professionals. They could give you advantages our family never could." "And what did they give you?" Tom asked quietly. "I don't know what you're implying." "I think you do. The Bennetts couldn't have children. A healthy toddler would have been highly desirable, but there's no record of Sarah's adoption. In the Kentucky system, Sarah felt sick. "You sold me, I ensured your future," Robert insisted, his eyes sliding away. "The Bennetts made a substantial donation to a trust for your education. Everything was legal, just expedited. And the condition was no contact with her birth family," Tom added. Inside the house, Noah called out. Sarah excused herself and returned moments later with her son. Noah reached toward Tom with a smile, oblivious to the tension. "So, what happens now?" Sarah asked. "You've kept us apart for 26 years. Why come looking for me now?" Robert's attention fixed on Noah. "Mother changed her will, left half her estate to you if you could be found. When she added that if you had children they would inherit regardless, I became concerned. So you knew I had a child, and suddenly Duke became a liability," Tom interjected, "because he might somehow lead back to Sarah." Robert's gaze dropped. To Ranger, that animal always had an unnatural connection to Elizabeth, and then to Sarah as a baby. "I was afraid that he actually might lead her to me," Sarah finished softly. "So you tried to get rid of him permanently," Tom continued. "A cruel, slow end." "I'm not discussing this further without a lawyer," Robert said stiffly. Noah, bored with the conversation, wiggled to be set down. He toddled toward Ranger and placed his small hand on the white star-shaped patch on the dog's chest. "No," the toddler said clearly. "Bad." Robert's face drained of color. That's exactly what you used to do with the dog when Elizabeth would argue with me. The porch fell silent as the strange moment hung in the air. I think you should go now, Tom said quietly. I'll be in touch about the animal cruelty charges. Robert left without another word, gravel spraying from his tires. Are you okay? Tom asked when the car was out of sight. Sarah nodded. I just want to build a relationship with my grandmother and keep my son safe. 3 weeks later, Eleanor Walsh moved into Sarah's farmhouse. The transition wasn't simple. Eleanor still had good days and bad days with her memory. But with Tom's help arranging home health care and Emma's continued support with Ranger's recovery, they established a new normal that felt inexplicably right. Robert remained in Lexington but kept his distance, his lawyer communicating that he wouldn't contest any changes to Eleanor's care arrangements. The animal cruelty investigation continued, with Tom methodically building a case. One crisp October afternoon, 6 months after Ranger had been found, Sarah sat watching Noah and Eleanor examine fall leaves together. Ranger dozed nearby, his body now healthy and strong. He's going to walk soon, Eleanor predicted, smiling as Noah pulled himself up using Ranger's side for support. Elizabeth started walking at this age too. Sarah treasured these glimpses into her mother's life, the history she'd been denied for so long. Suddenly, Ranger lifted his head, attention focused on Noah. The toddler had managed to stand unassisted and was wobbling precariously. Noah, Sarah called softly, are you going to walk for us? Noah looked at her, then at Eleanor, his face splitting into a grin. He lifted one foot, hesitated, then took a shaky step forward, then another, and another. Ranger rose to his feet, positioning himself just ahead of the toddler, providing a goal, a destination. He's doing it, Eleanor whispered, tears filling her eyes. Noah took 5 wobbly steps before plopping down, laughing with joy. And then, in a moment that seemed to crystallize everything, Ranger threw back his head and barked, a clear, strong sound of celebration that echoed across the yard. It was the first time he had barked since coming to live with them. Noah clapped, his hands demanding more, more. Ranger obliged with another joyful bark, then trotted to the toddler and gently licked his face. That evening, after Noah and Eleanor were asleep, Sarah sat on the porch swing with Ranger beside her. The autumn air carried the scent of wood smoke and falling leaves. You found us, she whispered, her fingers finding the white star on his chest. Somehow, against all odds, you found us and brought us home. Ranger sighed contentedly, leaning against her in canine affirmation. Together they sat in peaceful silence, guardian and guarded, both finally where they belonged. And in the quiet Kentucky night, a circle that had been broken for 26 years was finally perfectly complete. Dear listeners, we hope Sarah, Noah, and Ranger's journey has touched your heart, the incredible bond between a child and a loyal dog, the healing power of family, and the way love can transcend time and distance remind us of the connections that truly matter in our lives. For more emotionally captivating stories like this one, we've prepared a special playlist that explores themes of forgiveness, rediscovery, and unconditional love. You'll find it by clicking on the link to your left. If this tale moved you, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the depth of human experience and the healing power of love. What family reconnections have you experienced? What pets have changed your world? We'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most profound connections find us when we least expect them but need them most.